we're witnessing the end of the post-World War II political, economic, military system that was put in place. UN's one of those. And the reason the UN will go away is because I think the Trump administration does understand that if they persist, or if the war is renewed in the Middle East, that Iran is in a position to shut down the flow of oil out of the Persian Gulf. And so it's good to have as a backup the oil that's there in Venezuela. The problem with Venezuela is it's bigger, much bigger than Grenada or Panama.
You're watching CapitalCosm. My name is Danny. It is October 29th, 2025, and my guest today is the publisher of Sonar21.com. It's none other than former CIA intelligence analyst Larry Johnson. Larry, thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
Hey, Danny. Yeah, listen, I've been watching all the gold and silver news. You've got quite a lineup there.
Yeah. Well, if there was ever a time to talk about gold and silver, it's got to be now, right? So you got to strike while the iron/metal is hot.
Yeah.
So great. Well, I'd like to continue talking gold and silver as I normally do, but I'd like to leverage your expertise in geopolitics even more so, Larry. And I know you just got back from Moscow. What was it, earlier this morning or last night? Or
yesterday, about 6 p.m. Sarasota time, Florida. It was a 31-hour trip. So,
wow.
Because of the sanctions, you don't do a direct flight to Moscow. So Moscow to Doha, Doha to JFK, JFK to Charlotte, Charlotte to Sarasota.
Man, well, you are a champ for coming on the show just 12 hours or so, a little over 12 hours removed, or let's say 21 hours removed 21 hours removed from your flight. But nonetheless, what were some of the key insights that you saw over in Moscow? Does it change your perspective, your model, as it relates to the relationship between the U.S. and Russia and Europe?
Well, and this is actually relevant to the discussions you've had with, all the different experts that have been on your show that are in the financial arena. There's so much gaslighting going on in the United States, out and out lying to the American public about a whole host of things, and about the economy, and about Russia. We're told, oh boy, the Ukrainians are just devastating the Russian oil industry with their attacks on the drones. It's going to force them to collapse. The economy is going to collapse. Their inflation's out of control. They don't have enough people.
2 more weeks.
Yeah, 2 more weeks. What a load of crap. What most, and I'm shocked by this, but most of the financial analysts in the West that look at Russia fail to understand Russia does not need to do international trade in order to maintain a healthy, viable economy. Doesn't need it. It does it. It does gain some benefit from it. But Russia is really the only country in the world that you could build a wall around it and say, okay, you live off on what you got inside the wall. They'll live fine. They got all the food they need. They got all the power they need. They've got oil. They've got gas. They've got all the natural resources. They don't need to deal with the West. But they grow a lot of grain. So, hey, we can sell that grain. We'll make some cash off of that. Export oil, sure. But, here the Ukrainians say, oh, we destroyed a refinery. All the oil that the Russians are sending overseas is unrefined. The refining is being done in places like India and China. Then you get to we saw the Trump administration. Oh, we're imposing these harsh sanctions on Rosneft and Lukoil. Well, I think Lukoil is a privately owned company. And it basically, if they're doing business in dollars, they're not going to be able to do it. It's illegal now. They're not doing much business in dollars. It's been shifting. We just saw India start to purchase oil from Russia using the Chinese yuan. And China is in turn, doing trade with Brazil in their own currencies. There's no more. The demand for the dollar on the international market is going down. It's not going up because of the kinds of sanctions the United States tried to impose on Russia and then China in the wake of the special military operation that started in February of 2022. That the U.S. habit of you do what we want, or we're gonna sanction you, and we're gonna punish you. You're not going to get to use the dollars. Well, guess what? They created a strong incentive for people to say, "Hey, let's find an alternative to the dollar," which is exactly what's happened now. But we saw that in the trade dispute with China, China not only said, "Hey, no more rare earth minerals for you in the United States," and those rare earth minerals, while they're not dollar wise, they don't represent an enormous amount in the trade between the two countries. But without those rare earth minerals, critical defense technologies and weapon systems and communication systems cannot be produced. And there's no alternative out there that we just say, okay, I don't like your price. I'm going, it's not like you're in a bazaar in Morocco or Cairo and you don't like the price for the rug in this shop, so you're going to go across the way because there are lots of rug shops. There are not lots of rare earth mineral shops, number one. And then on top of it, China said, you know what? We're going to stop buying soybeans from you in the United States. The soybean market just fell off the table. They're buying all the soybeans now from Brazil, and they're accepting payment for it in the Brazilian currency, the real. So, and then here you got all these U.S. farmers who were counting on selling this product to China, and they got no income. And if they bought a new tractor or harvester, tough to make payments on that. So the world is changed fundamentally as a consequence of this war in Ukraine and the failure of the West to understand Russia's economy, that Russia has great alternatives outside of the United States, outside of Europe, doesn't need them, and yet we still labor under the illusion that, oh man, they need us. I mean, like we're the crack dealer and they're the crack addict. They need us, man. They don't have another source. It's not how it is.
Are we looking towards more regionalization on the part of the United States moving forward? Because if, like you mentioned, it was really the Ukraine war that proved to be the catalyst to reigniting BRICS, this search for a new settlement currency. As a matter of fact, when the war really started moving in Russia's favor in early 2024, that's really when gold bottomed and began its move up that we're currently seeing. So all of these signs occurred, around 2022 to 2024.
Right.
And so now what you're seeing is the United States kind of looking towards its own backyard, now looking towards Venezuela, for example, now looking towards that Argentina, becoming more concerned with regional matters, although they still are concerned with global matters, right? I mean, they're still, they've still got their fingers over there in Ukraine, but not to the same extent that they did a year ago under the Biden administration. They still have their fingers over there in Iran and in the Middle East as well. But you are starting to see more attention being paid to the Western Hemisphere. What do you see as the rationalization behind this? Is this a retreat back away from globalist hegemony, or is there a method to the madness here?
Oh, I don't think I think it's just madness. There's no method. I think this is insanity. Look, I'm an old guy. I probably won't live to see the final culmination of this, but you will. That we are witnessing the end of the post World War II Bretton Woods system, not just the financial system, but the political system. We're witnessing the end of that. It's coming apart. Europe and the United States are desperately, desperately trying to cling to the power that they had or perceived that they had. let's step back and deal with reality. Right now, the Russians have developed at least 3 variants of hypersonic cruise ballistic missiles. In addition, they've got this strategic hypersonic missile called the Oreshnik. And then they just came out 2 days ago, 3 days ago now, announced the Burevestnik missile, which is a cruise missile powered by a nuclear reactor. Think about that. This is Star Wars territory. We're Star Wars, Star Trek. Beam me up, Scotty. You've now got a missile that's flying around the world that can stay up for indefinite periods of time. Doesn't have to go to the gas station. Doesn't need to get a booster rocket. It's got all the fuel on board. This actually, I think, this kind of technology is going to be incorporated, I would think, in Russian spacecraft, so that they now actually have a power source that can get them to Mars in a reasonable amount of time. So they've got that Bereshnik. What do we have in the United States? Nothing. We don't have a single deployable hypersonic missile in our system. Not one. China has some. Iran has some. So it's like, well, are we technologically incompetent? Yes. That's the shocking answer. We've been bullshitting ourselves so long. We stand in front of the mirror and say, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? And, we've been paying that mirror to say, oh, man, you look great. You are a stud. Look how you walk. Look how you talk. But the reality, we could not defeat the Taliban in Afghanistan. Now, think about this. We got a bunch of these retired generals showing up on television saying, well, look how bad Russia's doing in Ukraine. They've made very, very slow progress over the last 3.5 years. Yeah, but they're moving forward. And they're moving forward at a rate that when they do exchanges of bodies between dead Russians and dead Ukrainians, for every dead Russian, the Russians are turning over 30 dead Ukrainians. Okay?
And would you say Russia is in a stronger position today versus 3 years ago?
Oh, absolutely. They are militarily the strongest, most capable military in the world right now. Outclassed the United States on every front, except maybe transgender pronouns. Okay, United States, we kick ass on that, man. We can they, them, us, much better than the Russians. But when it comes to recruiting soldiers, training soldiers, then deploying them to the fields and engaging in levels in incredibly complex combat operations where you're using, you've got somebody his job is to do a reconnaissance drone, and then he spots a location where there is either a Ukrainian artillery battery, an air defense system, or just a headquarters. And then that information is immediately shared with somebody who can target with a drone or with a missile or with a bomb. And so they've got instant battlefield communication and coordination up and down. It's what they call net centric. The United States doesn't really have that. We've got the U.S. Army, and we've got the U.S. Marine Corps. They got sort of their own pipelines that they talk through. Sometimes we do joint operations, but those can be pretty messy. Same thing with Navy, same thing with Air Force. So, the Russians got a clear advantage on that front as far as being able to integrate their combat operations.
And now it looks like the U.S. is subcontracting the war over to Europe, which is even less capable.
Yeah.
Than the U.S. So, doesn't Russia stand to benefit in letting this war prolong as opposed to, in a very haphazardly way, come into the negotiating table and end it? Don't they have a lot more runway to really get something good out of it?
No, absolutely. They're not losing money on this war. They're making money, as is the as the tendency with so many wars. It's one of the reasons I think the United States has always maintained our, first Vietnam, South Korea, Vietnam. Uh, then we got the wars in Central America, and then we had wars in Africa, and then Iraq. And yeah, it can be good for shareholders. That's true, but no, for Russia, from a strategic standpoint, they recognize they are bleeding out the capability of Europe and NATO in general, Europe in particular. And with each passing day, they are diminishing the capabilities of Europe and the Ukrainians. I think when this war finally ends, we will see also the end of NATO. NATO as an entity will probably fall apart because its reason to exist. They keep falsely claiming that Russia wants to take over Europe. From the Russian standpoint, I talked to 27, 28 people over the last 10 days in Russia, including a couple of generals, uh, a sniper who's lower level, a non-commissioned officer, the number two guy in the Duma. The number is be like talking to number two in the U.S. Senate. Not that talking to Chuck Schumer is a great idea, but this guy was smarter than Chuck Schumer. I can say that for sure. The guy who used to be the head of their economic ministry in the Far East. And 4 or 5 members of Congress or their legislature, and they are united with respect to this war being ended in ways that it's going to make Russia secure. There is Putin is under no time pressure to bring it to an end. Now, there have been some Western analysts that suggest, that there's such outrage at Putin because it's been so slow that they're going to overthrow him in a coup. That's just nonsense. I think it's Western-inspired propaganda. The Russians are discovering, the war has enabled the Russians to discover some things about themselves that they may not have fully appreciated. It's like if you'd watched some guy who was considered a great debater. I'll give you a personal experience. I had never debated Alan Dershowitz until 1998. And, I looked at it and said, oh man, here's Dershowitz. He's a Harvard guy. I was just a University of Missouri guy. I didn't have the creds. I didn't have the experience that he had had. And there I was debating him on CNN, Crossfire. And I beat him.
What was the topic?
It was the peace process in the Middle East. Gee, imagine we were talking about that almost 30 years ago. How's that going? Okay.
A long-held tradition in the media.
Yeah, and we were particularly, it was on the issue of Jonathan Pollard and the fact that he was an Israeli spy. And Dershowitz did his best to try to defend that undefendable position. But my point out of that is, afterwards I went, hey, I can compete at the Harvard level. I didn't have to go punch my ticket there. I've got the debating chops that I can stick in there and hang. That's sort of what's happened to Russia. They assume us, oh man, can we really withstand NATO? Then they get in there and start slugging it out because it's a de facto war with NATO. And they look around and go, these guys aren't that tough. We thought it was going to be like Mission Impossible. Nope. It is the realm of the possible. So Russia is waking up to some capabilities. And then it also, the thing in the West where we differ is the West operates on a zero-sum game mentality. We're going to win or lose. There's no in between, and there's no win-win situation. Whereas the Russians they have a different mindset, and I attribute it in part to sort of the influence of Orthodox Christianity within their movement. But they're always looking to do deals that make everybody better off, not worse off. It is, these are two worlds that are at exact opposites. But Russia, with respect to this war, It's going to be settled on the battlefield. Uh, they would be willing to have a negotiation, but the U.S. and Ukraine will not accept the Russian terms for negotiation. Russian terms are very simple. Crimea, Zaporozhye, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk. Those are 5 former oblasts of Ukraine. They voted. They had plebiscites in each of those territories, and they all voted to become part of the Russian Republic. And they are now legally part of the Russian Republic. Russia's not giving those back. There's no do-over now. They are now permanently part of Russia. And then the Ukrainian troops need to withdraw. And if they don't withdraw, they will be killed or captured, but they will be forced out. And the West needs to end all of the NATO shenanigans that have been underway in Ukraine since at least 1995. And I discovered received some information from a friend who's been involved with the intelligence community and U.S. military special ops. Ukraine played a much bigger role in the war on terror in terms of providing a place where we could torture people and hold them illegally. And so they were happy to go along with doing that.
The war on terror after 9/11?
Yes.
Fascinating. Is there a scenario where Russia would be emboldened, or maybe that's not the right word, but Russia would be incentivized to take more of Ukraine should the Europeans not, back off?
Yeah, Europeans and the United States.
And the United States.
The deal's on the table right now, and Putin and Gerasimov both intimated, if you don't take the deal, we're going to take additional territory. So they will take. I'll tell you right now, I predict they're going to take Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, Sumy, maybe Poltava, but they're going to also take Odessa, and they will take Kiev. Russia will capture and control Kiev before this war is over. That may be a year from now, but again, they're under no pressure to end it. They're winning on the battlefield. They're not taking massive casualties, as is claimed in Western propaganda. And it's just, Danny, it's a math problem. So let me lay out the math problem, and you tell me how this would work. If Russia is firing 8 to 10 times as many artillery rounds at the Ukrainians as the Ukrainians are firing at the Russians, which side's going to kill more on the other side?
Yeah, it's pretty big asymmetry. It's 10-1, 8 to
Exactly.
10-1. Yeah.
Similarly with drones, Russia has superiority in drones, numbers, and types that are attacking, and they're suicide drones. They've got the advantage there. They've got the advantage now in terms of manpower. They have a 2-to-1 advantage, looks close to a 3-to-1 advantage. They are dropping these bombs that are called fabs. They basically fly forward. They especially adapted them, and they can travel upwards of 100 miles and hit accurately. So when you go, and then missiles, haven't talked about all the various cruise missiles, the Kinshas, the Iskanders. Then they've got smaller variants of that. Again, Ukraine doesn't have that. So you've got this whole lopsided firepower on the part of the Russians, and yet these people say, "Oh yeah, Russia's losing. They got a million men." No, it's a lie. It's more gaslighting from the West, and you can't solve a problem if you don't correctly diagnose what it is. If your leg hurts and you got a tumor inside, it doesn't matter how many athletic wraps you put on. You got to cut the tumor out, or else you're going to die. And what's happening right now is the West's delusion about the nature of the strength of the Russian military and the decisive edge it has over all NATO countries is leading the West to continue to insist, "Oh yeah, Russia's going to lose any minute now. All we got to do is hit one more oil refinery, and that'll be the end of them."
Yeah, I mean, these are so. I'm going to take us back a couple of months ago from today. There were these reports coming out of France, these leaks, let's say, uh, warning their hospital systems to prepare for mass casualties, somewhat akin to uh, something that would elicit
Right.
mass casualties on their front. And then you also I've confirmed this with other people who were in the know as well. But it's not just the French hospitals; it's other European hospitals. It's pretty much standard across Europe now. So they're
Yeah.
anticipating uh, mass casualties on their front. Is war anything but inevitable at this point in time?
Uh, it's not inevitable. It's highly likely. I know that Martin Armstrong is big on predicting that there will be war, but it's important to understand the Russians have a completely, and this included the Soviets, a completely different mentality with respect to war than the West does. The West kills civilians in large numbers. Remember the bombing raids we did over Berlin and Hamburg and Dresden and Stuttgart and Cologne and Frankfurt and Tokyo and Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States was regularly bombing, using strategic bombing on civilians, killing large number of civilians. The Russians don't do that. They didn't do it in World War II. Anybody that thinks I'm lying, to go back, check the sources, find me one example where the Russians, who had a much larger air force than the United States did, believe it or not, where they didn't conduct what they would call strategic bombings of civilian centers. They fought the military. They fought the army. Well, so the prospects of mass civilian casualties in Europe, you know, extremely, 0%. That the Russians are not going to do that. It goes against their very core of who they are. Now, are they going to kill military personnel? Yeah, that's possible. And will they hit military sites? Absolutely. Um, and those that claim that, well, Russia's been killing civilians in Ukraine, okay, give us the number, give us the names, because if you've killed a bunch of civilians, they got names, don't they? And I guarantee you, if they were actual civilians, Ukraine would be publishing those names. But what's curious is that many of these strikes that Russia carries out, where it's claimed that they're civilians, they never release the names. Because if they release the names, they're going to release the names of foreign mercenaries, of actual NATO military personnel, and U.S. and Western intelligence personnel. So that's why the names don't get released. It's just there's a little bit of a deviation, but it's the same nonsense we saw with respect to the Israelis claiming, oh, Hamas beheaded 40 babies. Really? What are their names? Show us the pictures. I'm sure their grandparents have pictures of the kids. Well, they never showed them because it didn't happen. So a lot of this, I think, is Western fear mongering and propaganda. Again, it's gaslighting the public, trying to convince the public of something that Russia really poses a threat to them, when the ones that have been threatened have been the Russians by NATO.
Okay, guys, quick break, because if you've been following this channel, you already know we talk a lot about preparing for what's coming. And there's a new book that I think everyone watching needs to check out. It's called After the Fall: Worldwide Financial and Economic Collapse, a real world survival guide. Now, this isn't your typical fear mongering book, it's a step by step survival playbook for navigating a major economic collapse. It's written by Bilal Ormani, a guy who's lived through real financial chaos across multiple industries and countries. He's seen what happens when the system breaks down, and more importantly, what actually works to survive it. Inside, he breaks down how the monetary system actually works, how to protect your savings and businesses during a crash, and the common mistakes people make when fear takes over. You'll learn about inflation, hard asset strategies like gold, and even how to think like a commando when things start falling apart. What I love about it is that it's super practical, no jargon, no fluff, just real world strategies to help you protect your wealth and your family. So if you want to support the channel and get your hands on one of the best real world guides out there, You want to grab a copy of After the Fall today. Link is down below. Don't wait until it's too late. Start preparing now. I see. What is the level of synchronization between Russia, Iran, and China? Iran is also facing its own form of adversity in its own sphere of influence. And you have been seeing the Russians supply them with S-400s. China has also been supplying them with fighter jets as well. But one can also cynically make the case that Russia, in a weird, twisted way, kind of benefits if Iran gets itself into a war, and also Iran, in a weird way, may also stand to benefit if it's able to entangle the U.S. in a ground war.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of make what do you kind of make of the alliance between those three countries, and how you anticipate them working with one another, if at all, in their respective arenas?
Um, they listened to Benjamin Franklin. I think it was Franklin who said on the eve of the start of the American Revolution, "If we do not all hang, if we do not all hang together, we shall surely hang separately." And the construct of that is, if we don't stay together and work together, then we're going to be, if we're out on our own individually, we're going to be killed. Iran, prior to June 12th, June 13th, when the surprise attack by Israel took place, intending to decapitate the leadership in Iran, Iran had consistently rejected offers of military assistance from both China and Russia. China and Russia knew what was coming, and they kept offering Iran, "Hey, we'll come in and boost your air defense. We'll work with you in intelligence sharing, a whole number of issues." And Iran, primarily for religious reasons, and the religious reason was they didn't, if they felt that if they got into that kind of close military relationship with China or Russia, and that China or Russia became embroiled in a war, then Iran would be obligated to follow suit. And Iran is not, despite the claims we make about the mullahs, they hate America so bad, but they haven't launched attacks outside of Iran. They've been more the victim of attacks inside Iran by a variety of Western terrorist groups, or groups, Western, these are Islamic, some of them are Islamic extremist groups, but that are paid by the United States, that have carried out attacks in Iran. So Iran now is a member of BRICS, and for both Russia and Iran and China, Iran is actually an important pivot point for economic trade, both east and west, and north and south. They're just separating Iran and Russia, or the belt. Let's call it the belt of the Caucasus. You got Georgia, you got Armenia, you have Azerbaijan. It is no coincidence that the U.S. Embassy in Yerevan, in Armenia, is one of the largest in the world. And I believe that's because of an extremely large CIA presence that's working both to carry out covert actions against Iran and against Russia, because it's seen as trying to create a distraction for Russia in the south, and also being able to try to weaken Iran. So, but Iran and Russia have agreed on a north-south, let's call it a north-south highway, but it's a combination of both maritime transit and transit over rail lines, in order that trade can go all the way to St. Petersburg in the north, down to the Indian Ocean. No more need to go through the Suez Canal. No more need to transit the Red Sea. So this opens up a tremendous potential economic pipeline north to south. Similarly, China has moved has a rail line that extends from China all the way to Tehran, and so that's a way that also you can load the 40-foot containers on those rail cars and haul them across. So both Iran Iran had finally awakened from its slumber and has accepted extensive military support advice and counsel from both Russia and China in the wake of the 12-day war in June. And they are now in a much stronger position that if Israel decides to attack them, it will be, it will be very, I think, devastating for Israel, because Iran's ability to launch hypersonic missiles remains intact, and that's Iran and Israel and the United States failed to destroy or disrupt that capability during that 12-day war. We've seen also senior military and political officials from the Iranian government. They're they're racking up frequent flyer miles going up to Moscow. It's about a 4-hour, 3-hour trip from, say, Tehran to Moscow. Larijani, who's a close confidant of the Ayatollah Khamenei, he's been a frequent visitor both with Putin, with Lavrov, the foreign minister, and with Gerasimov, the chief of the Russian army. So, Iran's ready. And the other thing that's curious is the effort of the West to isolate them and use sanctions it's blowing up in their face, because both China and Russia have now said, we're no longer going to enforce any UN sanctions against Iran. We're going to trade freely with Iran, and that gives Iran some hope now for its economy, because the economy there was pretty damaged by the foreign sanctions.
Is the UN a pretty impotent organization at this point? I mean, the US doesn't really take it seriously. Now you're telling me China and Russia aren't going to be enforcing their sanctions as well. I mean, how much longer until the UN just becomes disposable?
Yeah, well, actually, and that goes back to what I said to you earlier about we're witnessing the end of the post-World War II political, economic, military system that was put in place. UN's one of those. And the reason the UN will go away is because any organization that allows France and England to have veto power in the UN Security Council is a joke. France and England are like two toothless, nasty little chihuahuas. And I use the chihuahua because if you've ever been around them, they have a reputation for the meaner they are, the longer they live. But they're just a little bitty dog, yappy, noisy. Um, that's England and France. Meanwhile, you have India with 1.5 billion people that's relegated to the cheap seats, like, oh, you're not a power. They are an economic power. They're one of the top 5 economies in the world. In, in fact, what we have right now is of the top 5 economies, I think 4 of, and as you measure it in terms of purchasing power parity, GDP purchasing power parity, you've got at least you got Russia, China, India, and I think Brazil is number 4. But you've at least got 3 solid BRICS countries in the top 5. So, this we're going to see a transition where either the UN will have to reform itself and send France and England to the sidelines. Hey, been nice having you guys, but you no longer are on the board of directors. Okay, you're just a simple shareholder. We're going to bring in some new directors on this board. India will be one of them. Maybe Brazil would be one of them, because you want the countries with the economic and military power to sit there at that table. France and the UK, the days of their military power are in the past.
Yeah, totally. Before we shift over to the Western Hemisphere, like we kind of alluded to at the start of the show, I want to get your thoughts on this meeting that we saw last week between Putin and the new so-called president of Syria, Ahmed al-Shara, formerly known as Jolani. What do you make of this meeting they had back there in Moscow? Is this will this impact at all the relationship between Russia and Iran? Because as you well know, and many other people may know as well, but for those who don't, Syria was a big part in getting the weapons from Iran into the hands of Hezbollah, which is an Iran affiliate. So how is that going to play out?
Well, let's notice. Let's be clear about the nature of Al Shara, aka Al Jilani. He had a $10 million reward on his head by my former office at State Department, the now Bureau of Counterterrorism, uh, because he was a bona fide uh, Sunni extremist, and where they would kill other Muslims because they declared that those other Muslims didn't have the same faith that they have. Now,
Takfiris,
yeah, Takfiri, um,
Wahhabis. Yep.
the Wahhabi sect comes out of Saudi Arabia, the Deobandis out of Pakistan, but
Mhm.
it's all based around, it's built around Sunni extremism. Um, but he's also been a CIA asset since at least I'd say at least last 6 years. So he was CIA and British MI6, I think, had joint control over him. But notice what happened when go back a year ago when Assad was overthrown. And everybody said, oh, this is man, Russia's finished. It's a big punch in the gut for Russia. And the same for Iran. Well, now Ashara has come to Putin and said, hey, would you guys please stay in Syria and keep your military bases open? Uh, we might need your help in fending off the Israelis. Yeah, but Putin's a pragmatic guy. He said, okay, sure. We'll talk, we'll discuss. It's going, the Russians, as I mentioned earlier, it's not about, zero sum game. It's about, hey, let's figure out ways we can work together. Now, I guarantee you also that the rat lines where Hezbollah supplied, those haven't disappeared. I mean, look, that that region, they've they've been smuggling stuff from the east uh, for 2,000 years, 3,000 years. So you've got tribes, you got networks of how people, they make money, they survive, and they go on from generation to generation. So it's actually with Russia taking this middle position now with respect to the Al Shara government. Uh, there'll also be a way that they can broker some realignment and reduce the hostility that may exist between Iran and Syria. So again, these pronouncements we had a year ago about, oh boy, Russia's on its heels, it's getting run out of the Middle East. Yeah, how do you like them apples? Because there's Al Shara went on his own volition. He wasn't commanded by the Russians, get up here or else. Russians said, come up, let's talk. And the what Al Shara said was, please stay, don't go away, don't leave me. And Russia said, okay.
Interesting. So let's go ahead and shift over to the other side of the pond.
Yeah.
And this has been developing for a few weeks now, but you have these U.S. fleets right off the coast of Venezuela, just bombing boats that are deemed to have been carrying drugs and things of that nature. And to kind of tie it into what we just talked about the last 30 or so minutes, there are these unconfirmed reports that Russia sent the Wagner group in there, and
right.
That there are similar reports out there as well, still unconfirmed, regarding Iranian Shahed drones that are in the possession of the Venezuelan government too. So, I mean, what are we looking at here in Venezuela? Here, Larry, are we getting ready for a ground invasion, some sort of regime change? It seems like Russia and Iran may be providing some sort of support. They do have some interest in Venezuela. That is part of that network, let's say, between them and China as well. How do you see things transpiring over there? And how do you see the Russia-China-Iran alliance playing out in that arena as well?
Okay. So let me at least establish some of my bona fides and able to why I can talk about this. My consulting firm, Berg Associates, we set up in 1998. Now we're essentially defunct now because we're all older. But one of my partners was Robert Nieves. chief of international operations for DEA. He was the one that set up the Kingpin program way back in 1980. That was going after the leaders. The theory was you go after the leaders of the drug cartels and it'll cause them to fall apart. He later admitted, okay, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but it didn't quite work out that way. My other partner, John Moynihan, he ran all the DEA undercover money laundering operations in New York City. Set up front companies, over 180 cases, people who pled out instead of going to trial. And one of the things we did with Berg Associates, we had extensive involvement in conducting investigations in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Mexico. We actually we had Mexican government ready to sign a contract with us to do a civil RICO case against Wachovia Bank, but the Obama administration intervened and threatened them that if they went along with us, they'd punish them. So with that as background, this lie that Venezuela is this major drug trafficker and some kingpin, and Maduro's a kingpin in it, it's just a complete load of male bovine excrement. It's not true. It's a lie. It's gaslighting. It's creating a narrative that, frankly, it started in 2018 when Donald Trump in his first term. If you call, I did some research because I'd never heard of this group, Tren de Aragua, until like this year, last year, and I go, where the hell did that come from? Well, a little bit of research shows it pops up in 2018, coinciding with when Donald Trump starts his effort to get rid of Maduro, and then they were going to put in that other, Juan Guaido as president, and they hey, he's president. We'll have him at the State of the Union address. Yay, and that didn't work out. But I guarantee you that the whole Tren de Aragua stories started circulating in South America. That they were planted, I believe, by my former intelligence organization, by the CIA, because you develop these narratives, you get the stories planted in social media and in actual newspapers and on radio programs. So, this is a real group, and they may actually be a real group, but they've been used as I believe, as an intelligence prop, along with claiming, here's Venezuela moving all these drugs out of Venezuela. Remember the first boat they blew up? It was a cigarette boat, 60 foot in length, 4 outboard motors. You know how far that boat can travel, Danny, with 4 outboard motors, fully fueled, how far it can travel from the north coast of Venezuela until it needs to be refueled?
I'm going to say much less than the distance between that and the coast of Florida.
Yeah, so the distance from Venezuela's coast to Florida, about 1,300 miles. Now that boat can go 250 miles on those on just one load of fuel, which means it's going to have to be refueled at least 3 more times to just make it to Florida. Okay, do the math. Get a 5-gallon jerry can, stack that up, and recognize you're going to need about 300 of those jerry cans to have enough fuel to get to Florida. And then you got 11 people on the boat. Where the hell is the room for the drugs? There's no room left. And yet here's the media going, yeah, boy, we killed these narco traffickers. It's a lie. It is a lie. And it is one of these situations where we're now witnessing sort of the culmination of the authorities given to President George W. Bush in the aftermath of 9/11, that what was called the Authorization for the Use of Military Force, military acronym AUMF. And under that, we can go kill anybody that we want. We don't have to prove that they're a bad guy. We can just say that they're a bad guy. And we haven't learned a damn thing in 24, 25 years. In the initial days after 9/11, when we, CIA went back into Afghanistan in force, one of my classmates and a good friend, he told me at the time that the CIA was putting out a reward. Give us information on who's an Al-Qaeda guy. Well, what the Afghans figured out was you could take the guy that you didn't like, that may be a business competitor, and you could just label him as Al Qaeda, and the United States would scarf him up and go torture him for a while, and you'd make some money off of the deal. And we had probably 80% of the people that were, quote, Al Qaeda that we picked up and stuck in Guantanamo had nothing to do with Al Qaeda. Same thing's going on here with this drug trafficking. Different boats, different people. I'm sure some are being figured by competitors, but that's not where the drug money doesn't, the drugs themselves don't flow into the United States from a bunch of small boats trying to make it north to Florida or to Texas or Louisiana or wherever.
So who are these people in these boats? Are they just people just joyriding the seas and
fishermen?
Fishermen?
But there may be some like cigarette smugglers. There's a big, one of the cases we did with Berg Associates was a racketeering case against all the major tobacco companies. Philip Morris was the principal one that they settled that in 2004 for 1.5 billion. That was with Europe. We sued on behalf of the European Union and the governors of Colombia. But is it smuggling of cigarettes and other household appliances and such? Oh, absolutely, that could be it. Or they're fishermen. But drug traffickers that are moving drugs, no. I mean, for one thing, it's terribly inefficient. You can't move that many drugs in that way, whereas the major pipeline is over the border of Mexico, or it's coming on board cargo vessels from overseas.
Yeah. And so what is the objective from the standpoint of the United States in doing this?
Oil, control the oil in Venezuela. I think there is I think the Trump administration does understand that if they persist, or if the war is renewed in the Middle East, that Iran is in a position to shut down the flow of oil out of the Persian Gulf. And so it's good to have as a backup the oil that's there in Venezuela. The problem with Venezuela is it's bigger, much bigger than Grenada or Panama, and the U.S. Cannot do a lot of damage to it without having to put in a major ground force, which we don't have the resources to do that. If they're stupid enough to put in, say, 4,000, 5,000 Marines, and those Marines try to move from the coast, that's where the major airport is down on the coast, and then you move up a mountain road into Caracas. Tell you what, the ambush positions along that road that are made to destroy an invading army. And Venezuela is just a big country that we could say it'll be Spanish for Vietnam. Okay. But it is, it's one where Trump, if he tries to put ground forces in, could really get bogged down. And we'll have American casualties, guaranteed. Yeah, and we'll kill a lot of Venezuelans, but in the process, we could really light off what would be a counter war against the United States throughout Latin America, because there are plenty of groups that would love to kill some Americans for our years of bullying and corruption. So this is a real. What's alarming to me is we've got so many members of Congress making excuses for this illegal activity, and they say, "Oh well, Ronald Reagan invaded Grenada." Yeah, well that was wrong too. That was trumped up. And yet we've established that while we claim that we're fighting like a war on terrorism, we're using the justification of a war on terrorism to go after alleged drug traffickers, and yet we're leaving the real drug traffickers alone. And I'll give you just one case, one example, one case I worked on personally. I was doing due diligence for a bank in Panama. They came to me and said, "Hey, we got these two clients. One's a Ukrainian and one's a Spaniard, and they're selling soap online, and they're being processed using this U.S. bank card. I said, huh. So I checked it out. Well, it was a bank called the International Bank. It's located, they got branches all along the Texas Mexico border. And there were these, they were debit cards. In the course of the investigation, I learned they were debit cards, but I had a list of every transaction. I had names, addresses, social security number, phone numbers. So to check it out, I started calling up the people on the list I was a customer service rep from the soap online company, and said, "Hey, I'm just calling to say, did you like your purchase of soap?" And they go, "What soap?" I go, "Well, what, you didn't buy that?" "Oh, no, 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 we didn't buy that." Well, it turned out how this scam worked is this drug trafficking organization went to a bank, a U.S. based bank, gave them, let's say, $2 million for $1.5 million worth of debit cards. And the bank got away with the KYC, know your customer rules, because they had all this data that had been downloaded from the dark web, and they could then have a name with each of the credit cards or each of the debit cards. And so what they would do is they would charge the card. The money would then be deposited in the Panamanian bank, and then after 3 or 4 days, it would build up. The Panamanian bank would then ship it to a bank in Cyprus, and then whoop, into the ether. Now, we've got U.S. financial institutions up and down the chain of command. We've got U.S. corporations up and down the chain of command that are taking drug money, knowingly taking drug money. And I'll name one other company where I had personal experience. We got called by the security director of John Deere, and he goes, "Yeah, we got these checks, and they don't appear. We're not sure what's going on." Well, what it was something called a third party check, where you got three or four different people who are sending checks to pay for one tractor that was then going to be shipped to Colombia. Well, this was the era of what was called the black market peso, and the black market peso worked like this. They would get the cartels would get bank accounts opened in the United States by regular Colombians and other people. The drug proceeds from sales in the United States would be deposited into those accounts, and then you had starter checks off of those accounts that would be in the hands of the black market guy, the drug cartel guy in Colombia. So if you're a farmer in Colombia and you go, "What? Hey, I want to buy a John Deere tractor, and I'm going to have to change 10 pesos for $1 to buy that tractor." And but you find out in the black market, guys say, "Hey, I'll sell those pesos to you for 7 pesos to the dollar." You're saving 3 pesos, and over like $1 million purchase, that's a bit of money. And that was one of the ways that the cartels brought the money back from the United States, and then U.S. corporations will help them launder the money. And when we explained this to the John Deere guy, he said, "Well, great." He took it to the CEO. The CEO said, "Not our problem. We're going to sell the tractors." That's what I mean, that there are U.S. corporations complicit in this, but we don't blow them up. No, because they make campaign contributions.
Very well put there, Larry. I don't have anything else that we have on the docket to talk about. So anything you'd like to talk about that we didn't get into before we wrap things up here?
No, we're just these sanctions that we tried to put on the Russian oil companies. Again, that's blowing up on us, because those sanctions are simply forcing those companies to divest of all U.S. Dollar resources. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, the fact that as the BRICS nations grow, and as this alternative financial system they've set up becomes more institutionalized, the demand for the U.S. dollar is going to continue to go down. And at some point, the United States is going to be looking around and not be able to finance its debt as we have been over the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah, the clock is ticking for sure. Where can people find you if they want to see more of your work, Larry?
Come to sonar21.com, and they'll give you all the links.
That was a very salesy pitch you got there. So come on down to sonar21.com featuring Larry Johnson.
Yeah. And the Tommy Bahama shirts, you know. I,
Oh,
I, when
it wouldn't be Larry Johnson without the Bahama shirt.
well, when I was in Moscow, you know, I
Mm.
was in Moscow for the last 12 days, as of, you know, I got there on the 14th of October, left on Monday. I was in suit and tie, and people were
Oh,
going,
yeah.
"Who is that?" You know. So I'm back in regular clothing, back in Florida.
Back in form. Exactly. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on, Larry. It's been a pleasure talking to you, as it always is, my friend. If you guys got value out of this podcast, drop us a like and comment, go, Larry, go in the comment section. If you agreed or disagreed, either way, let me know your thoughts. I do, in fact, read all the comments, but you've got to let me know why you disagreed or why you agree. Let me know your reasoning. I do read all the comments. I can't reply to each and every one of them, but I will reply to a small handful of them. So drop me your thoughts and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an episode. And by liking, subscribing, and commenting and doing all the other YouTube stuff, you help us in boosting this video and this channel and this message in the algorithm. So it may not seem like much, but a little bit certainly does go a long way. And it's free. Everyone's favorite 4-letter F word. So with all that said, thanks for watching, guys. And check us out on Substack at capitalcosm.substack.com to get all my stuff early and ad free. And I will catch you later.